Hello and welcome to the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast. I'm your host, Rosa Hart, and today I'm joined by Jessi Sheridan. Thank you so much for being with me tonight.
Thanks for having me, Rosa.
So, Jessi is a coach and leadership and she's coach for ambitious women, and she does that in group settings as well as one-on-one. And she came highly recommended by another leader that I love to talk to, Brian Urban. So I'm really glad to get to know you. We got to talk another day and get better acquainted, but I can't wait for the world to find out about the amazing work you're doing for women who are trying to branch out into leadership and helping them to grow and embrace their strengths. So thank you for the work that you do.
Oh, well, thank you.
So Jessi, tell us some more about Habitual, your company, and the work that you do with women.
Yeah. So, Rosa, 3 years ago, almost to the day, I was sick in bed with COVID, like many people at the time. And I sort of had this moment of, what am I doing? What do I want to be doing? And what's the impact that I want to have on the world? And I was in a job that I had been doing for many years, and it was a good job. I liked it. But I knew that there was more for me to be doing. And I think having this moment to slow down for 5 days left in bed really opened my eyes to the fact that I really wasn't leaning into my full potential. And there were a lot of things happening at the same time with women's rights being sort of taken away. Roe v. Wade had just been overturned. I just had this reckoning of there's more that I could be doing to support women in this world. My entire career has been in leadership or leadership development. And so I thought, well, why don't I just start talking to women in my network here in Philadelphia and not only hear their story, but amplify their stories during a time where many people are feeling isolated because of the pandemic, and many women are feeling like we're sort of going back in time when it comes to our own rights. And so I started talking to a bunch of women, and a year went by very quickly. And I had interviewed 93 women in that year and heard their stories and shared them out with the world and learned a lot in along that way. And I started to really see what I might enjoy doing, which was, leadership coaching, giving women the tools to step into their leadership and really define their own path. Not necessarily what society has told them, but defining their own path and charting that course. And so what was meant to be a 1 year creative outlet has turned into, I'm starting year 4. We've interviewed and featured 199 women. Tomorrow will be my 200th interview. And I don't think there's any sign of stopping. It's been a real joy to hear women's stories and to give them a place to share their stories. And it's created so much more than that. It was a storytelling platform and is now an empowerment community where women are coming together, supporting each other's businesses, and really with this underlying tagline of when we come together, we rise together. So this meant to be this collective of women coming together, supporting one another, and really creating a ripple effect in our communities to best lead and support, our families, our workplaces, and so forth.
Yeah. And let's talk about the health tie-in there and how important it is to empower women, especially those who are trying to, you know, forge ahead in leadership positions or create leadership positions where there are none. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. The one thing that we know from the pandemic and even prior to the pandemic is that we have really found ourselves as a society in a space of isolation and this space of um, feeling, lacking community. And so what happens when we don't have a good sense of community or a good sense of belonging is that we are really missing that connectedness that comes that that helps our mental health, helps our well-being day to day. And it's so important that we have that connection and that we are getting together, whether it's virtual or in person, to be able to come out of that sense of isolation and really support our mental health and physical health. And that is one part of what I am finding is being created here with Habitual is this opportunity for women to come together and feel less alone. We are in this loneliness epidemic, and that many people think that came from the pandemic, but it's actually found that it started before the pandemic because of phones. We're all on our phones. And
But that's
so
supposed to be the way we talk to each other.
I know.
How is that
I
possible?
know. Well, social media has its pros, but it also has its cons from well, I didn't get invited to this or to that, or I'm not traveling around the world. And so we start to feel lonely. And then the pandemic came along and really furthered that isolation. And so what community does is helps with that loneliness, and that can really help with the easiest thing that it helps with is our mental health and really keeping us engaged with others and feeling that sense of belonging and that worthiness that comes with being in community.
Yeah, definitely. And, a lot of people might have had assumed they had community before in their church groups, and
Right.
there's less people going to meet in churches and things like that in person, like voluntarily. And so we'll see people at work or things like that. But I've encountered with a lot of women, they'll try to join a new group and feel like an outsider and not welcomed in easily. Um, or even in my experience, I tried to be with groups that I agreed with everything that they said they believed on paper, but then they didn't wanna do life together, and so that felt isolating. It's like I would make time to be around them, like, multiple times a week, but then during COVID, it's like there was nothing outside of that structure, and so something I've been doing is trying to build these relationships based on maybe mutual interests, but with the priority of I wanna build friendships with people who want to do life together, and, um maybe that might mean traveling the world together or going to fun events together, or it might mean my house just got hit by a tornado and these are the people who are gonna drive across town to help clean up and or help move a couch,
Yeah,
things like that. And just
right.
knowing you have that person, those people to call on in those times, um, is so reassuring. And so I'm really glad that you're prioritizing building a community because it is definitely needed.
Yes, it is. And it will continue to be needed just because we've got AI now that is, creeping into all of our lives. And again, it has its pros, but can also have its cons and can really create more isolation than I think is intended for. Oftentimes, these tools are created to help us, but sometimes they really can hinder our connectivity.
Well, if we use them in a way that lends itself toward that, right? Like, I have used AI to help me say things in a way that does not destroy my community, right? Like, okay, this is what I need to communicate, but
Yes.
how do I say this in a way that does not make my boss fire me or other people hate me? So, and it's been very helpful for that. So, I think if you use it with that intentionality and let it know those objectives in your prompts. I know for a while ChatGPT did have that sycophantic phase where it just was like agreeing with everything you're saying. And I heard that had some bad repercussions in supporting people and doing some things that were
That's
probably not supporting their community.
right.
But,
Right.
but yeah, and like you were saying with social media, this is a shameless plug for me. If you go to nurserosaspeaks.com, I have a printable freebie you can download that is how to go from doom scrolling, which lots of people talk about doing,
Mhm.
to hope scrolling. And that is the techniques that I use to make my feed a positive feed, and how to practice using social media, which I do a lot, in a way that will make you happier and not give you just FOMO.
Yes. Good. It's a great resource.
Yeah, you'll have to check it out. I would love to get your approval, Jessi.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think each day there's a level of scrolling, right? But I like the idea of hope scrolling versus doom scrolling because it is nice to just zone out for a little while. It's again how we use the tools that can either really hurt us or help us and
Mhm.
or give us hope.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
got to tell it what you got to tell the algorithm what you want. And
Yes.
then you have to actually look at what you believe you want long enough for it to actually believe you and continue to give you that content. Because if you just skip over it, then it's like, you don't really want that.
It knows.
Yeah, so we do have agency and we do have some responsibility there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this brings us to the $1 billion question, though,
Oh,
because what you're doing on maybe a micro level with individuals and small groups is what everyone needs, really. But if you were given a grant for $1 billion
yeah.
to meet the needs that you see in the healthcare spectrum, how would you like to see that used to have the most sustainable impact?
So as I shared with you, I've interviewed and featured 199 women's stories, and oftentimes we are talking about health, whether it's reproductive health or mental health, menopause, across, the spectrum of women's health. And so when you asked me this question, I really got to thinking about a few different ways that I would use this money. And the first is to fund comprehensive women's health, not just reproductive health, and reproductive care, although I am very passionate about that. But the full spectrum, maternal health care, autoimmune conditions, perimenopause, menopause, heart health is a big one for women. These areas are chronically underfunded and under researched and very much misunderstood at times, and women are often dismissed or misdiagnosed. That has come up in quite a few interviews, or forced to navigate these broken systems while trying to, you know, lead their households or lead their companies and just kind of trying to hold everything together. And so first I would fund the comprehensive healthcare. Second, I would invest in the infrastructure, care infrastructure. Many women I've interviewed and featured are caregivers, whether that is for their children or for elder care, taking paid leave and supporting folks who are unpaid caregivers. I'd love to be able to invest in that infrastructure because many of those roles are overwhelmingly held by women, and it becomes a health issue because there's stress, there's economic stability, and this long-term well-being that really could be developed if we're able to reduce burnout, right? And really increase equity. So starting there to be able to support these caretakers, um, and support their health, as well as funding that comprehensive women's health care. And then the final piece of it would be the putting dollars behind like a growing and sustaining a diverse pipeline of women leaders. So across the healthcare system, so doctors and nurses and tech founders, researchers, and policymakers, all of these folks having a more representation of women within that so that it it's a more equitable across the healthcare ecosystem. And then I would have to, like, wrap it all in a bow by telling the story of those who are a part of this ecosystem, because that's what I do. I'm a storyteller. And, so those are the 4 components of what I would do if I had $1 billion. And so, whenever you get that $1 billion, I will be waiting, ready to partner with you on these ideas.
Well, it might be closer than we think because maybe somebody will hear this and they'll be like, Jesse's just the person for this thing that I've been wanting to get going, right? Or, they might steal your idea and we're okay with that here,
And I'm
right?
okay with that, as long
Hey,
as it happens.
if you want to solve all the world's problems that surround women without Jesse, I think she'll be okay. But
I'll be right there cheering you on, ready to tell your story.
that's right. That's right. And you tell stories through writing, right?
I do, I do. Um, I am moving into video, but for 3 years, it has been all written, transcribed content, allowing folks to truly read the full interview and, hear the story through written dialogue.
Yeah. So that's a really different modality than I usually use. And so
Yep.
now you're coming over onto my turf here.
Well, if I can figure out how to do the recording, we'll see.
Hey, we're getting practice right now.
We
So
are, we
that's
are.
good. You got your microphone, you're all set up. So if there's women listening to this who want to reach out to you, how would you like them to do that?
You can always find me on my website, of course, habitualleadership.com. And I am pretty active on social media at Habitual and LinkedIn as well.
And I'll have the links to all of that in the show notes as well. So I really appreciate you putting all this positivity out there
Yeah,
and helping other people be heard and letting them shine. And I'm glad to let you shine a little bit too, because you're often in the background. And
that is true. Thank
so
you.
people who like to stay in the background aren't as good about pushing themselves forward. So good job getting on camera.
Thank you, Rosa, and thanks for giving me a place to really talk about and to really think critically about, if I were given this gift of $1 billion, how I could use this passion and all of this knowledge that I have learned from these nearly 200 women to really make an impact in the healthcare system.
Yeah, definitely. I just saw a post on LinkedIn. I think they said this artwork of a banana duct taped to a wall sold for $6.5 million or something. They're like, why didn't they use that to fix some of the world's issues? And I mean, it just goes to show there is so much money out there.
It's there.
It's there. And so we need to be ready. We need to think about solutions. That's why I've invited you here. That's why I've invited every single guest to come on to the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast. Because my insight is let's think of these solutions and put them out there. And then hopefully the money can attach itself to these tangible solutions. Because just sitting around complaining about things isn't going to make it better.
Right. Right. Yes. And if we can manifest that money to come in,
Mhm.
and you've got great responses from folks who have been on here before me, and there's not a bad idea that's out there.
Right, right? There's so many great ideas. So I really appreciate you spending the time to come out here. And if you've enjoyed this episode of the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast, be sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. Give it a like and comment if there's something you learned, or if you know of someone who has some insights that need to be amplified, feel free to reach out to me for them to be on the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast. And if they're a woman in leadership, I mean, I bet Jessie would probably
I
like
would love
to
to meet them.
amplify them as well. So send them on. All right. Well, and I will see you in the next episode.